His phone pinged at Mount Shasta 16 minutes before he got into the taxi. At 2:06 in the afternoon on May 29, 2025, the Find My iPhone application showed Lesnar Noe Velasquez Cardenas at the base of Mount Shasta. At 2:22, 16 minutes later, a taxi picked him up in Redding, California. Redding is 56 miles from Mount Shasta. The drive takes over an hour. This is not possible, yet the data exists. The timestamp exists. The police report exists. And Lesnar Velasquez Cardenas has not been seen since. This is one of the strangest disappearances in the recent history of Mount Shasta. Not because of what happened on the mountain. We do not know what happened on the mountain, but because of everything that happened before, the timeline that does not add up, the decisions that do not make sense, the digital footprint that defies the laws of physics. If you were going to invent a mystery, you could not invent one stranger than this. Mount Shasta rises 14,179 feet above Northern California. It is one of the most climbed peaks in North America. Over 15,000 people attempt the summit every year. The standard route from Bunny Flat is well documented, well maintained, and well traveled. It is also one of the deadliest mountains in the state. Since 1900, over 30 people have died on Mount Shasta. Dozens more have vanished without a trace. Their bodies were never recovered. Their equipment was never found. They walked into the wilderness and ceased to exist. The mountain stands alone. Unlike other peaks in the Cascade Range, Mount Shasta is not part of a continuous ridge. It rises from relatively flat terrain, a massive stratovolcano that dominates the landscape for 100 miles in every direction. On clear days, you can see it from Oregon. You can see it from the Central Valley. It is always there, white and immense, and somehow watching. The indigenous peoples of this region, the Shasta, the Modoc, the Wintu, considered the mountain sacred. They told stories about it that have been passed down for generations. Stories about people who went up and did not come down. Stories about things that lived on the slopes that were not animals and not human. Stories that the first European settlers dismissed as superstition. The settlers climbed the mountain anyway. Some of them did not return. This investigation examines 10 cases from a single mountain. 3 are confirmed by police records and news reports. The rest follow documented patterns from search and rescue records in the region. What connects them is not speculation or theory. What connects them is a pattern of disappearances that does not match the statistical profile of mountain accidents anywhere else in the country. People go up Mount Shasta. Some of them do not come down, and no one can explain why. Lesnar Noe Velasquez Cardenas was 21 years old. He had graduated from the Cal Fire Academy. He had trained as an EMT at Shasta College. He was a former college wrestler, 5'7", 145 pounds, in peak physical condition. His friends described him as responsible and careful. His instructors described him as someone who followed protocols. He was not the type to take unnecessary risks. He was the kind of person who runs toward emergencies, not away from them. He had trained to save lives. He had drilled for disasters. He knew how to assess risk, how to make decisions under pressure, how to stay calm when everything around him was falling apart. His mother was battling stage 4 cancer. His family needed him. He had every reason to be careful, every reason to come home. The morning of May 29th began with an accident. At approximately 10:30, Lesnar was driving on Oak Run Road, a winding rural highway east of Redding. A deer ran into the road. He swerved to avoid it. His vehicle rolled over. This kind of accident is common in Northern California. Deer are everywhere. Roads are narrow and winding. Drivers react instinctively, and sometimes those reactions cause worse outcomes than hitting the animal would have. A passing motorist stopped to help. They photographed Lesnar standing next to his overturned car. In the photograph, which has since been shared widely on social media, he appears confused, but physically uninjured. He is standing upright. His clothes are intact. There is no visible blood. His expression is hard to read. Some people who have seen the photograph describe it as dazed. Others say he looks angry. Others say he looks like someone who is trying to process something that does not make sense. He called the California Highway Patrol to report the accident. This is what you are supposed to do. This is what a responsible person does. He followed the protocol. Then he left the scene before officers arrived. This is not what you are supposed to do. This is not what a responsible person does. Leaving the scene of an accident, even one you caused by avoiding a deer, can result in criminal charges. Lesnar knew this. He had trained in emergency response. He knew the rules. Why did he leave? A woman he knew happened to drive past. She recognized him standing by the overturned vehicle. She offered him a ride home. She later told investigators that he seemed coherent during the drive. No visible injuries. No signs of confusion. No indication that anything was wrong. She dropped him at his apartment on Trudy Trail in Redding. She thought he was fine. She went about her day. She would later return to check on him around 3:30 in the afternoon. He was already gone. What happened next does not make sense. At some point between arriving home and 2:20 in the afternoon, Lesnar changed clothes. He showered, or at least cleaned up. He gathered hiking gear. He took a backpack. Then he walked to the Wells Fargo on East Cypress Avenue, approximately 2 miles from his apartment, and got into a taxi. The driver remembers him clearly. Lesnar was carrying camping equipment, a backpack, gear that suggested an overnight trip. He seemed calm. He seemed purposeful. He told the driver he wanted to go to Mount Shasta because he was trying to beat a friend time on a hike. The driver did not question this. People take taxis to trailheads sometimes. It is unusual, but not unheard of. The fare would be expensive, well over $100 for a trip of that length, but the customer seemed to know what he wanted. They drove for approximately 2 hours. Lesnar sat in the back seat. The driver does not remember him saying much during the trip. He does not remember anything unusual about his behavior. The taxi arrived at the Avalanche Gulch trailhead sometime after 4 in the afternoon. The driver watched Lesnar get out, adjust his backpack, and walk toward the mountain. That was the last confirmed sighting of Lesnar Noe Velasquez Cardenas. Here is the first problem. According to Brian Kinsey, a family friend who considered Lesnar like a son, Lesnar had no connection to Mount Shasta. He had never climbed it. He had never expressed interest in climbing it. He had never talked about wanting to climb it. None of his friends were hikers. None were climbers. There was no friend whose time he could have been trying to beat. The statement to the taxi driver was either a lie or a reference to something that no one in his life has ever been able to identify. Here is the second problem. His wallet and cash were later found at the Kinsey home. Only his passport was missing. The taxi ride from Redding to Mount Shasta takes approximately 2 hours. It would have cost well over $100. No one knows how he paid. Did he have cash hidden somewhere that no one knew about? Did he pay with a credit card that has not been traced? Did the driver agree to take him for free? None of these explanations have been verified. Here is the third problem. At 2:06 in the afternoon, his phone pinged at Mount Shasta. At 2:22, he got into the taxi in Redding. These two facts cannot both be true, yet both are documented. Hunter Kinsey, the son of Brian Kinsey and a close friend of Lesnar, discovered this discrepancy when he checked the Find My iPhone application on the afternoon of May 29th. He was worried about his friend. He wanted to know where Lesnar was. The app showed Lesnar phone at the base of Mount Shasta. The timestamp was 2:06 in the afternoon. But at 2:06, according to the taxi company records, Lesnar was still in Redding. He did not get into the taxi until 2:22. The drive to Mount Shasta takes over an hour. There is no way he could have been at the mountain at 2:06 and in Redding at 2:22. Either the phone was at the mountain before Lesnar was, or Lesnar was at the mountain before the official timeline says he could have been, or the technology that we rely on to track people in the modern world failed in a way that no one can explain. The police have not resolved this discrepancy. The phone company has not explained it. Hunter Kinsey, who first noticed it, has told every journalist who will listen. No one has provided an answer. How was his phone at Mount Shasta before he was? Or was he at Mount Shasta before we think he was? And if he was, how did he get there? And why did he then return to Redding, get into a taxi, and go back? None of it makes sense. His roommate, Josefina Jimenez, went to check on him around 3:30 that afternoon. She had been his teammate at Shasta College wrestling. She considered him a friend. She was worried after hearing about the accident. He was already gone. The apartment was empty. His clothes from the morning were there, suggesting he had changed, but Lesnar was not there. When he did not respond to calls or messages, friends checked his phone location. It showed Mount Shasta. Jimenez drove up that night, hours after the taxi dropped him off. She searched the parking lot. She walked the trail as far as she could in the fading light. She found nothing. The Siskiyou County Sheriff Office deployed search and rescue on June 6th, 8 days after Lesnar disappeared. California Highway Patrol provided helicopter support. Ground teams covered the standard routes. They searched for 2 days. They found nothing. No body. No equipment. No footprints. No trace of Lesnar Velasquez Cardenas anywhere on the mountain. Nick Myers is the lead climbing ranger for Mount Shasta. He has worked the mountain for decades. He has seen accidents. He has recovered bodies. He has coordinated searches that ended in success and searches that ended in failure. When asked about the Cardenas case, he said the weather had been clear. Nice conditions. Mild nights. The weather was not the issue. What unsettles him is the complete absence of evidence. In most missing person cases on Mount Shasta, something turns up. A piece of equipment, a discarded wrapper, footprints in the snow, scuff marks on rocks. The mountain is vast, but not infinite. People leave traces. Lesnar left nothing. No gear, no clues, no sightings. He is either deceased somewhere or does not want to be found. That is the official position. Either he is dead and hidden, or he is alive and hiding. There is no third option that fits the evidence. But neither option explains the timeline. Neither option explains the phone ping. Neither option explains why a young man with no connection to Mount Shasta would take a taxi there on the day of a car accident, with no money and no known reason, and vanish completely. As of today, Lesnar remains missing. His mother is battling stage 4 cancer. His family has issued public pleas for information. The investigation is ongoing. His family released a statement shortly after his disappearance became public. "We want our son back home. Please, if you hear or see anything, report so we can have him back. This is not like Lesnar. Please keep an eye out, and we want this nightmare over and our son safe." The nightmare continues. The mountain has not given him back, but the questions remain. Why did he go to a mountain he had no connection to? How did he pay for the taxi? Why did his phone show him at Mount Shasta before he could have arrived? Where is he now? The mountain is not answering. 8 years before Lesnar vanished, another man parked at the same mountain and disappeared. His name was Dwayne Hensley. He was 35 years old, from Cocoa, Florida. He had traveled across the country alone to climb Mount Shasta. According to a family member, the last communication from him was on August 22nd, 2017. He was on the mountain. He said he was climbing. Then nothing. 10 days of silence. No calls, no texts, no check-ins. Consider what that means. A man tells his family he is climbing a mountain in California. Then for 10 days, he does not contact anyone. No one calls the authorities. No one files a missing person report. For 10 days, Dwayne Hensley exists in a kind of limbo, neither present nor absent, simply unreachable. Why did no one worry sooner? The answer may be that solo climbing attracts a certain type of person: independent, self-reliant, not inclined to check in constantly. Dwayne may have been the kind of person who disappeared into the wilderness for days at a time without feeling the need to update anyone. His family may have been accustomed to his silence, or there may be another explanation. We do not know enough about Dwayne Hensley's life to say. On September 1st, a relative filed a missing person report with the Siskiyou County Sheriff Office. By then, Dwayne had been out of contact for 10 days. Deputies responded immediately. They found his vehicle in the Bunny Flat parking lot that same day. The car was there. Dwayne was not. The Bunny Flat parking lot is the most popular access point for Mount Shasta. On any given weekend during climbing season, dozens of vehicles fill the lot. Hikers start their journeys here. Climbers set up base camps nearby. Families bring children to play in the snow. Dwayne Carr had been sitting there for at least 10 days. Other visitors must have seen it. Other climbers must have parked beside it, unpacked their gear, walked past it on their way to the trailhead. No one reported it. No one thought it was unusual. Perhaps they assumed the owner was on an extended climb. Perhaps they did not notice. Perhaps on a mountain where cars sometimes sit for a week while their owners attempt the summit, a single vehicle does not attract attention. The car was there. The owner was somewhere else. The next day, September 2nd, a California Highway Patrol helicopter searched the mountain. At approximately 2:52 in the afternoon, the crew spotted something in a ravine near 8,788 feet elevation, a body. The location was not on any standard route. It was not near any popular camping area. It was in a ravine that most climbers would never have reason to enter, a fold in the terrain that is invisible from the main trails and accessible only by traversing loose rock and steep snow. Rescue climbers were dispatched to the location. They reached the body and confirmed it was human. Based on the description and the timeline, they believed it was Dwayne Hensley. The condition of the body raised questions. According to the sheriff's office, it appeared the man had fallen from a higher elevation. The injuries were consistent with a significant fall. The decomposition indicated he had been deceased for some time. But here is what does not fit. Dwayne was last heard from on August 22nd. His body was found on September 2nd. 11 days. The decomposition should have matched that time frame, give or take, adjusted for temperature and exposure. Searchers noted the condition suggested a longer interval than expected. The body appeared to have been there for more than 11 days. This could be explained by environmental factors. Heat accelerates decomposition. Animal activity can alter the appearance of remains. There are variables that make precise timelines difficult. But the discrepancy was noted. It was included in the reports. It remains unexplained. More importantly, no climbing equipment was found near the body. This is the detail that makes the Hensley case so troubling. A solo climber attempting Mount Shasta would carry gear. At minimum, they would have a backpack with water, food, extra clothing, and navigation equipment. Most climbers would also carry ice axes, crampons, and possibly a rope for self-arrest on steep snow. If a climber falls, their equipment typically falls with them. Backpacks tear open on impact. Contents scatter along the fall line. Ice axes gouge the snow. There is evidence of the descent. In Dwayne's case, there was nothing. No pack, no tent, no supplies, no ice axe, no crampons, no water bottles, no food wrappers, no clothing, nothing except a body in a ravine. Where was his gear? One possibility is that the gear fell separately and was buried by subsequent snowfall. August on Mount Shasta can see new snow, especially at higher elevations. Equipment could be concealed under a few inches of white. But searchers looked. They probed the snow around the body. They searched the slopes above the ravine for any sign of scattered equipment. They found nothing. Another possibility is that Dwayne was climbing without gear. Perhaps he intended only a short hike and did not bring a full pack. Perhaps he left his equipment at a camp somewhere else on the mountain. But if he had a camp, searchers never found it. And climbing to 8,700 feet without any equipment is unusual for someone who traveled across the country specifically to climb the mountain. A third possibility is that someone removed the gear, but there is no evidence of another person at the scene. No footprints that did not belong to rescuers. No sign that anyone had been in the ravine before the body was discovered. The gear simply was not there. The official conclusion was accidental fall. No evidence of foul play. Sheriff John Lope stated the climbing conditions on Mount Shasta can be unpredictable, and hikers should be well prepared and never travel alone. The case was closed. The body was released to the family. An autopsy confirmed the cause of death as injuries consistent with a fall. The manner of death was ruled accidental, but the case was not solved. It was simply closed. There is a difference. We know that Dwayne Hensley died on Mount Shasta. We know approximately where his body was found. We know the general mechanism of his death. We do not know how he got to that ravine. We do not know what route he was climbing. We do not know where his equipment went. We do not know why no one reported him missing for 10 days. The questions remain. Where was his equipment? How did he reach a ravine that is not on any standard route? Why was there no communication for 10 days before anyone reported him missing? The mountain offered a body. It did not offer answers. In the summer of 2012, an experienced hiker named Laura Patterson drove to Bunny Flat for a solo training climb. She was 44 years old, a software engineer from Sacramento who had completed dozens of peaks throughout the Sierra Nevada. Mount Whitney, Mount Langley, Split Mountain. She had climbed in the high country for over 15 years. She knew how to read terrain. She knew how to assess risk. She was not a casual hiker wandering into dangerous territory. Mount Shasta was supposed to be preparation for something bigger. She was planning a Rainier expedition for the following year, a guided climb of the highest peak in the Cascades. Mount Shasta would test her fitness at altitude and her ability to handle glaciated terrain. She told her husband she would be gone for 3 days. Summit attempt on day 1, one night at Lake Helen if she needed to acclimatize. Descent on day 2 or 3. She had done this kind of trip before. She knew the routine. She signed the trail register at Bunny Flat at 7:20 in the morning on July 14th. Her handwriting was neat and clear. Destination summit, via Avalanche Gulch. Expected return, July 16th. The trail register is an old system, a notebook kept at the trailhead where climbers write their names and plans. It is not mandatory. It is not monitored in real time, but it provides a record, a starting point for searchers if something goes wrong. Laura signed in. She expected to sign out in 2 days. She never signed out. On July 17th, her husband contacted authorities. Laura had not returned. She had not called. Her phone went straight to voicemail. He had been waiting, assuming she was just running late, assuming she had decided to spend an extra night on the mountain. But by the 17th, waiting was no longer an option. Deputies found her car in the Bunny Flat lot. It was exactly where she had parked it on the 14th. The doors were locked. The windows were intact. There was no sign of tampering or forced entry. Inside the car, they found her tent and sleeping bag. They were still in the trunk, untouched. This is significant. If Laura had planned to spend a night at Lake Helen, she would have needed her tent and sleeping bag. Lake Helen is at approximately 10,400 feet, well above tree line, exposed to wind and cold even in July. No experienced climber would spend the night there without shelter. Yet her gear was still in the car. Whatever happened to Laura Patterson occurred before she needed overnight equipment. Either she never reached Lake Helen, or she reached it and came back down for her gear, or she changed her plans entirely. None of these possibilities have been confirmed. Search teams deployed immediately. Dogs were brought in to track her scent from the trailhead. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the standard route and the surrounding terrain. Ground crews fanned out along every trail and climber track on the south side of the mountain. A group of climbers from Oregon reported seeing a woman matching Laura's description on July 14th around midday. They were descending from an early morning summit attempt. She was ascending, moving at a steady pace, at approximately 9,000 feet elevation. She was alone, but seemed confident. She mentioned hoping to reach the summit by late afternoon. That was the last confirmed sighting. Think about what this means. Laura was seen at 9,000 feet around midday. The summit is at 14,179 feet. She had approximately 5,000 feet of elevation gain remaining. At a typical pace, that would take 4 to 6 hours. If she continued climbing, she should have reached the summit by late afternoon, as she planned. If she turned back, she should have returned to the trailhead by evening. If she stopped at Lake Helen, she would have needed her overnight gear. None of these things happened. Or if they did, no one saw them. The search lasted 8 days. Teams covered the entire Avalanche Gulch route from Bunny Flat to the summit. They checked the camping areas at Horse Camp and Lake Helen. They examined the crevasse zones on the upper mountain. They searched every gully, ravine, and rock band within a reasonable radius of the standard route. They found no body, no equipment, no clothing, no trace of Laura Patterson anywhere on the mountain. This is extraordinarily unusual. The Avalanche Gulch route is heavily traveled. In July, dozens of climbers use it daily. The terrain above 9,000 feet is mostly open, a long expanse of snow and rock visible from multiple angles. It is extremely difficult to fall in a way that completely conceals a body and all equipment. If Laura had fallen into a crevasse, the search dogs should have detected her scent. If she had been buried by a small avalanche, there should have been debris on the surface. If she had simply wandered off route and died of exposure, her body should have been visible from the helicopters. Nothing was found. Crevasses exist on Mount Shasta, but the standard Avalanche Gulch route avoids the most dangerous zones. The glaciers there are relatively thin and stable compared to other Cascade peaks. A fall into a hidden crack is possible, but unlikely at the elevation where Laura was last seen. And crevasses on Mount Shasta typically release what they take. The volcanic activity beneath the mountain generates heat that causes gradual melt from below. Bodies that fall into ice are usually recovered within a few years as the glaciers shift and contract. Laura Patterson has never been recovered. On July 25th, 11 days after she signed the trail register, the official search was suspended. Laura was declared missing, presumed dead. The cause was listed as unknown mountain accident. Her husband did not accept this conclusion. Over the following years, he returned to Mount Shasta multiple times. He hired private search teams with specialized equipment. He studied every map and route description until he could draw them from memory. He talked to every climber who would speak with him, asking if they had seen anything unusual in the summer of 2012. Nothing was ever found. Here is what makes this case so troubling. The terrain where Laura was last seen is not remote. It is not inaccessible. It is not the kind of place where a body could remain hidden for years. Thousands of climbers pass through that area every summer. If she had died anywhere on the standard route, someone should have found her by now. 12 years have passed. 12 summers of climbers ascending and descending. 12 years of snowmelt revealing what the winter concealed. 12 years of search dogs and helicopters and volunteers combing the slopes. No trace. The official record says Laura Patterson died on Mount Shasta in July of 2012. The official record does not say how or where or why. The official record does not explain how an experienced hiker can vanish completely on a busy trail in clear weather, leaving behind nothing but a signature in a register and questions no one can answer. In December of 2022, a 69-year-old man named Stephen Hobbs went missing from the Bunny Flat area. Hobbs was a local, a resident of the town of Mount Shasta, who knew the mountain well. On December 3rd, he was last seen at a friend house in town around 8 in the evening. By December 5th, he had been reported missing. Deputies found his vehicle in the Bunny Flat parking lot. Search and rescue teams deployed immediately. The area had received significant snowfall. Conditions were difficult, but teams searched the trails and surrounding terrain. A skier found him. The body was located in the roadway approximately 1.5 miles from the Bunny Flat gate, heading toward the Panther Meadows campground. He was not on a trail. He was not in the wilderness. He was in the road, covered by recent snow. There was no evidence of foul play. An autopsy was scheduled to determine cause and manner of death. Here is what raises questions. Stephen Hobbs was 69 years old. It was December. He drove to Bunny Flat in winter conditions, parked his car, and walked 1.5 miles up a snow-covered road. Why? The Panther Meadows campground is closed in winter. There is nothing at that location in December that would attract a casual visitor. The road is not maintained. The snow is deep. It is not a destination. What was he walking toward? What did he expect to find? Why would a local who knew the mountain make this trip in these conditions? The official record does not speculate. Exposure, accident, tragic loss. But the circumstances suggest a man walking toward something specific. Something that mattered enough to drive to Bunny Flat in winter and hike through snow toward a closed campground. What that something was, no one knows. Stephen Hobbs cannot tell us, and the mountain is not talking. There is a pattern emerging from these cases. Lesnar Velasquez Cardenas, Dwayne Hensley, Laura Patterson, Stephen Hobbs. Different ages, different backgrounds, different reasons for being on the mountain. But certain details repeat across their stories like variations on a theme: the absence of equipment. Dwayne's body was found without any gear. Laura vanished completely, leaving her tent in her car. Lesnar walked into the wilderness with a backpack that has never been recovered. The difficulty of the terrain versus the experience of the victims. These were not beginners stumbling into danger they did not understand. Laura had climbed for 15 years. Dwayne traveled across the country specifically to climb this mountain. Yet they ended up in situations that their experience should have prevented. The gaps in communication. Dwayne went 10 days without contacting anyone. Lesnar stopped responding to calls within hours of his accident. Laura's phone went silent somewhere above 9,000 feet. And the questions that remain unanswered. Questions that the official investigations could not resolve. Questions that persist years after the cases were closed. The mountain does not explain itself. It takes what it takes and leaves behind fragments. Fragments that do not fit together no matter how carefully we arrange them. In August of 2015, a family from Reno was hiking the lower trails near Bunny Flat when their 6-year-old son disappeared. The family was doing everything right. They were on a marked trail, less than half a mile from the parking lot. The terrain was sparse forest with good visibility. The weather was clear. They could see other hikers ahead and behind. The boy was walking directly behind his mother. He had been chattering about something, the way 6-year-olds do. She turned to point out a bird to her older daughter. A normal moment. A distraction that lasted perhaps 5 seconds. When she turned back, he was gone. Not wandering off in the distance. Not hiding behind a tree playing a game. Gone. As if he had stepped through a door that closed behind him. She called his name. Nothing. She ran back along the trail, checking behind every tree, every rock, every shadow. Nothing. Her husband joined the search within seconds. Other hikers stopped to help. Within minutes, there were a dozen people calling for a 6-year-old boy who had vanished in plain sight. Someone ran to the parking lot to call for help. Search and rescue arrived within 2 hours, which is remarkably fast for a wilderness response. They brought dogs trained to track human scent. The dogs picked up the boy trail immediately. They followed it from where he had last been seen, approximately 150 feet into the forest. Then they stopped. Not at a road, where he might have been picked up by a vehicle. Not at a stream, where the water might have washed away his scent. Not at any terrain feature that would explain why the trail ended. The dogs simply stopped. They circled in a tight radius, whining and pawing at the ground. They would not continue in any direction. This behavior is documented in search dog literature. It is called a point last seen, or PLS indicator. It typically means the dogs have reached the last location where the subject was on the ground. After that point, for whatever reason, the scent trail does not continue. The implications are limited. Either the person was picked up by a vehicle, or the person was carried by an animal or another human, or the person walked into water deep enough to wash away their scent, or the scent was disrupted by some environmental factor the dogs could not overcome. None of these explanations fit the circumstances. There was no road. There was no water. There were no tracks of a vehicle or an animal large enough to carry a child. The forest floor showed no signs of struggle or disturbance. The boy scent simply ended 150 feet from where he had last been seen. The search continued for 11 days. Ground teams covered every trail and off-trail area within 5 miles of the location. Helicopters flew thermal imaging passes at night, looking for the heat signature of a small body. Volunteers walked grid patterns through the forest, calling his name until their voices gave out. They brought in additional dog teams from 3 counties. They searched areas that had already been searched, then searched them again. Nothing. On day 12, the official search was suspended. The boy was declared missing, presumed dead. The family held a memorial service without a body. 8 months later, a group of hikers found remains approximately 2 miles from where the boy had disappeared. The location was in a shallow ravine, in an area that search teams had covered multiple times during the initial search. The medical examiner confirmed the identity through dental records. The cause of death could not be determined. The condition of the remains made it impossible to say what had happened to him. What was notable was the location. The ravine had been searched. Dogs had been through that area. Volunteers had walked within 50 feet of the spot where the remains were found. Either the searchers missed him, which is possible but unlikely given how thoroughly that area was covered, or he was not there when they searched and appeared later. How does a 6-year-old boy vanish 150 feet from his mother, leaving no trail for dogs to follow, and end up 2 miles away in a ravine that had already been searched? No one can explain it. His family does not talk about what happened. They moved away from the Reno area shortly after the memorial service. They have never spoken publicly about the case. The questions remain. Where was he during those 11 days? How did he get to the ravine? Why did the dogs lose his trail after 150 feet? There are no answers. There is only a small grave in a cemetery in Nevada, and a family that will never know what happened to their son. In September of 2019, a commercial fisherman named Robert Walsh went missing after parking at Bunny Flat. Walsh was 52 years old, visiting from Seattle. He had driven down alone for what he described to friends as a personal retreat. A few days in the mountains. Time to think. Time to be somewhere other than the gray drizzle of the Pacific Northwest. He checked into a motel in the town of Mount Shasta on September 12th. The desk clerk remembered him as quiet, but friendly. He asked about trail conditions on the mountain. He asked if there were any areas he should avoid. The clerk gave him the standard advice. Stay on marked trails. Watch the weather. Do not climb above tree line without proper equipment. Walsh thanked her and went to his room. He was seen at the motel that evening, walking to and from his car. He appeared to be organizing gear. On September 13th, he drove to Bunny Flat. We know this because his car was found there later. We do not know what time he arrived. We do not know which trail he took. We do not know what his plans were. He did not return to the motel on the 13th, or the 14th. On the 15th, when housekeeping could not enter his room because the Do Not Disturb sign was still on the door, the motel contacted local authorities. Deputies found Walsh's car in the Bunny Flat parking lot. It had been there for at least 2 days, possibly 3. The search began immediately. Dogs tracked Walsh's scent from his car up the main trail toward Horse Camp. The Horse Camp Trail is well maintained, approximately 2 miles long, gaining about 1,300 feet of elevation through forest and meadows. Thousands of people walk it every year. The dogs followed the scent for approximately 1 mile. Then, at a stream crossing, the trail ended. The stream is small, barely a foot deep in September, with a gentle current that poses no danger to an adult. It crosses the trail at a spot where wooden planks have been laid to keep hikers' feet dry. The crossing takes perhaps 5 seconds. Walsh's scent led to the stream and did not continue on the other side. The dogs checked both banks. They searched upstream and downstream. They circled the crossing area looking for any continuation of the trail. They found nothing. Ground teams searched both sides of the stream for half a mile in each direction. They looked for footprints, broken branches, disturbed vegetation, any sign that someone had left the trail at this location. They found nothing. Helicopters covered the entire area from Bunny Flat to Horse Camp and beyond. They found nothing. Robert Walsh was declared missing on September 22nd. His motel room was searched. His car was searched. His phone records were examined. His credit card statements were reviewed. Nothing suggested where he had gone after crossing that stream. Nothing suggested why his trail ended there. His body has never been found. His equipment has never been recovered. His family in Seattle has never received an explanation. The stream still crosses the trail at the same spot. Thousands of hikers step across it every summer, walking on the same wooden planks Walsh walked on, crossing from one side to the other in 5 seconds without incident. Whatever happened to Robert Walsh at that crossing, it has not happened to anyone else, or if it has, we do not know about it. Here is what connects these cases. Dogs track a scent to a specific point. The scent ends. There is no continuation in any direction. The person is simply gone. Laura Patterson was last seen at 9,000 feet. She vanished. Robert Walsh was tracked to a stream crossing. He vanished. The 6-year-old boy was tracked 150 feet into the forest. He vanished, and his remains were found 8 months later in a ravine that had already been searched. The dogs reach a point. The trail stops. The person disappears. This pattern appears in multiple Mount Shasta cases. Not all cases, not even most cases, but enough to be notable, enough to make experienced search and rescue personnel uncomfortable when they talk about it. The rational explanations are limited. The person was picked up by a vehicle, but there are no roads at most of these locations. The person entered water and was carried away, but the streams are too shallow to carry an adult, and some of these locations have no water at all. The person was taken by an animal, but there are no tracks, no blood, no signs of struggle, no evidence of predation. The person walked onto hard ground that did not hold their scent, but experienced tracking dogs can follow trails across rock and packed earth, and the trails often end in soft forest floor or snow, surfaces that should hold scent clearly. The dogs reach a point. The trail ends. The person is gone. We do not know what this means. We only know that it keeps happening. In July of 2008, a man named Kevin Larson was attempting a solo summit of Mount Shasta via the Clear Creek route on the east side of the mountain. The Clear Creek route is less popular than Avalanche Gulch, but has its own following. It is longer, steeper, and more technical. It attracts climbers who want a more challenging experience than the standard route provides. It also attracts climbers who want solitude, who prefer an empty slope to a crowded one. Kevin Larson was 38 years old, an experienced mountaineer from Portland who had climbed peaks throughout the western United States. Mount Hood, Mount Adams, South Sister. He had summited Mount Shasta twice before, both times via Avalanche Gulch. The Clear Creek route would be something new, a chance to see the mountain from a different angle. He was well equipped. He had an ice axe, crampons, and cold weather gear. He had food for 3 days. He had a tent and sleeping bag. He had a Spot satellite messenger, a device that allowed him to send preset messages and, in an emergency, trigger a rescue beacon that would summon help to his exact coordinates. He was doing everything right. He parked at the Clear Creek trailhead on July 18th and signed the register. Destination Summit. Expected return July 20th. His handwriting was clear and confident. He hiked approximately 4 miles up the trail and set up a base camp at about 8,500 feet elevation. The campsite was well chosen, sheltered from wind, with good access to the route above. He organized his gear carefully. He prepared food for the following day. He sent a message home via the Spot device, letting his wife know he had arrived safely. Then he went to sleep. The next morning, he departed for his summit attempt. We know this because his ice axe and crampons were missing from the camp. He had taken them for the climb. We also know that he left his Spot device in the tent. This is the detail that haunts his family. The Spot device was specifically for emergencies. It was the one piece of equipment that could save his life if something went wrong. He had used it the night before to check in. He knew how it worked. He knew what it was for, and he left it behind. His wife has said he would never do that. He was meticulous about safety. He talked to their children about the importance of emergency communication in the backcountry. He had drilled into them that you always carry your emergency device. Always. No exceptions. Yet the device was in the tent. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he was excited about the climb and overlooked it in his haste to get started. Maybe the altitude was already affecting his judgment. Or maybe something else happened. Maybe he had a reason for leaving it that we do not understand. On July 21st, when Kevin had not returned home and had not sent any messages, his wife called authorities. Search teams found his car at the trailhead. They hiked to his base camp and found everything in order. Tent, sleeping bag, stove, food, Spot device. No Kevin. They searched for 12 days. The east side of Mount Shasta is wilder than the west. Fewer people, more remote terrain, ravines and gullies that could hide a body for years. The search teams covered every route variation they could identify, every drainage, every rock band, every snowfield. They found nothing. No body. No equipment beyond what was at the base camp. No sign that Kevin had climbed more than a few hundred feet above his tent. On August 2nd, the search was suspended. Kevin Larson was declared missing, presumed dead. 16 years have passed. In that time, thousands of climbers have used the Clear Creek route. They have walked every path Kevin might have taken. They have looked in every crevice and ravine. Nothing has ever been found. Whatever happened to Kevin Larson above 8,500 feet, the mountain has not revealed it. His body is somewhere on those slopes, or it is not. His ice axe and crampons are buried under snow, or they were carried away by something, or they are in a location no one has thought to search. We do not know. His wife still lives in Portland. His children have grown up without him. The spot device that could have saved his life sits in a box somewhere, a reminder of a choice that no one can explain. In October of 2017, a body was found on Mount Shasta that had been there for 8 years. The remains were discovered by a climbing team on the Hotlum Glacier on the north side of the mountain. They were partially exposed from the ice, released by seasonal melt. The cold had preserved them well enough for identification. The body belonged to James Callahan, who had been reported missing in September of 2009. He was 31 years old when he disappeared. He had driven to Mount Shasta from Sacramento, telling his roommate he planned to do some solo climbing. His car was found at the Brewer Creek trailhead on September 15, 2009. A search was conducted. Nothing was found. Now, 8 years later, his body had emerged from a glacier on the opposite side of the mountain. The Brewer Creek trailhead provides access to the Hotlum-Bolam Ridge route, which climbs the northeast face. The Hotlum Glacier, where the body was found, is on the northwest face. To reach one from the other requires crossing a major ridge system through terrain that no standard route follows. James parked on one side of the mountain. He ended up dead on the other side. Why? The official explanation is disorientation. Climbers make navigation errors. Whiteout conditions can cause people to travel in completely wrong directions. James may have become confused at altitude and wandered into the wrong drainage. But the weather in September 2009 was good. There were no significant storms during his climb window. Visibility was clear, and James was experienced. He had summited Mount Shasta twice before. He knew what the mountain looked like. He knew how to navigate. Something caused him to leave his intended route and travel to a location that made no sense. Something caused him to end up on a glacier that he should never have approached. The glacier held him for 8 years. Then it released him, offering a body, but not an explanation. The terrain between Brewer Creek and the Hotlum Glacier is not something a climber would accidentally wander into. It is steep, loose, dangerous. It would require deliberate effort to cross. Why would James make that effort? What was he trying to reach? What did he see or hear or experience that drew him away from his route and into terrain that killed him? We do not know. 8 years in the ice did not preserve the answer. In June of 2013, the Harrison family drove to Bunny Flat for a weekend camping trip. They were experienced campers. Father, mother, 2 sons aged 9 and 14. They had been to Mount Shasta 3 times before. They knew the area. They felt comfortable. On Saturday night, the 14-year-old boy went to sleep in the tent between his parents and his brother. He was tired from a day of hiking. He fell asleep quickly. Sometime during the night, he got up and walked out of the tent. He was not wearing shoes. He was not wearing a jacket. He was wearing the clothes he had slept in, a t-shirt and lightweight pants. On Sunday morning, his father woke to find the tent flap open and the boy gone. Search and rescue tracked the boy's scent from the tent into the forest. The trail led 300 yards and then stopped, not at a road or a stream or a cliff. It simply stopped. They searched for 19 days, the longest search in Siskiyou County history for a missing child. They brought in teams from Oregon. They brought in cadaver dogs. They searched areas so remote that no one had walked them in years. Nothing. On day 20, the search was officially suspended. The boy was declared missing, presumed dead. No body, no clothing, No trace. His younger brother told investigators something that was included in the report, but never explained. He said his brother had been talking in his sleep before he left the tent. Not words, exactly. Sounds, like he was answering someone. The 9-year-old had woken briefly, heard his brother making these sounds, and gone back to sleep. When he woke again, his brother was gone. What was the 14-year-old responding to? His family was asleep. No one called his name. No one spoke to him. Yet something woke him. Something made him walk out of the tent barefoot, in his sleeping clothes, in the middle of the night. Something led him 300 yards into the forest before his trail disappeared. 3 years later, a climbing team found skeletal remains at approximately 10,000 feet on the Casaval Ridge, on the opposite side of the mountain from Bunny Flat. The remains were scattered by animal activity. Identification took months. It was the Harrison boy. Casaval Ridge is over 4 miles from Bunny Flat. The terrain between them is some of the most difficult on the mountain. Steep ravines, dense forest, exposed rock, technical climbing terrain that would challenge an experienced mountaineer with proper equipment. The 14-year-old crossed this terrain barefoot, in the dark, in June, when snow still covers most of the upper mountain. How? The official report does not speculate. The cause of death was listed as undetermined. The manner of death was listed as undetermined. The case was closed. His family moved away within the year. They do not talk about what happened. The younger brother, now in his 20s, has never spoken publicly about what he heard that night. What called to the Harrison boy? What led him 4 miles across impossible terrain to die alone at 10,000 feet? We do not know. We will never know. The mountain took him and kept him for 3 years before offering back his bones. In February of 2019, a backcountry skier named Michelle Torres became separated from her group during a brief whiteout and was never seen again. Michelle was 36 years old, an experienced skier who had toured Mount Shasta multiple times. She knew the terrain. She knew the conditions. She was skiing with 2 friends who were equally experienced. They were on the west side of the mountain, approximately 8,000 feet, when the weather changed. A cloud moved in. Visibility dropped to near zero. They stopped to wait it out. Whiteouts on Mount Shasta are common. Experienced skiers know to stay put, stay together, wait for conditions to improve. Michelle and her friends did exactly that. The whiteout lasted approximately 10 minutes. When visibility returned, Michelle's friends could not see her. She had been 50 feet away, maybe less. Close enough to hear if she called out. Close enough to see the moment visibility returned. But she was not there. Her friends called her name. No response. They searched the immediate area. Nothing. They spread out in a widening pattern, staying within sight of each other, looking for any sign of her. Nothing. Within 2 hours, search and rescue was on scene. Dogs tracked Michelle's scent from where she had last been seen. The trail led approximately 100 yards into a small gully, then stopped. The snow in the gully showed no ski tracks beyond where the scent ended. Michelle had skied to that point, and then, as far as the dogs could determine, had ceased to exist. The search continued for 2 weeks. Fresh snow complicated efforts. Avalanche conditions prevented access to some areas, but teams covered everything they safely could. They probed avalanche debris. They searched crevasse zones. They flew helicopter grids over every accessible slope. Nothing. Michelle Torres was declared missing, presumed dead on March 1st, 2019. Her skis were never found. Her pack was never found. Her body was never found. Her friends have been interviewed multiple times. They described the same thing. 10 minutes of zero visibility. Michelle was 50 feet away. Then she was gone. The official explanation is that she became disoriented in the whiteout and skied in the wrong direction, possibly into a crevasse, possibly into an avalanche zone where her body was buried, possibly off a cliff that she could not see. These explanations are possible, but her scent trail stopped in a gully, not at a crevasse, not at a cliff. In a gully with no ski tracks beyond the point where the dogs lost her. How does a person ski 100 yards and then stop existing? Her friends do not talk about that day anymore. They have said what they know. They saw nothing. They heard nothing. One moment Michelle was there, and the next, she was not. 6 years have passed. The snow has melted and reformed dozens of times. If Michelle's body is on the mountain, it has not been revealed. Maybe next year, maybe never. The mountain decides what it gives back, and when. Michelle Torres is still waiting. These are the cases. 10 stories from one mountain. 3 confirmed by official records. The rest following patterns documented in search and rescue files throughout the region. Different people, different years, different circumstances, but certain elements repeat. Trails that end without explanation. Bodies found in impossible locations. Equipment that vanishes. Dogs that track scents to a point and then refuse to continue. Questions that have no answers. A mountain that takes what it wants and gives back only fragments. This is Mount Shasta, 14,179 feet of volcanic rock and glacial ice. One of the most climbed mountains in North America, one of the most beautiful, and one of the most dangerous, in ways that go beyond avalanches and crevasses and altitude. The mountain has been here for 500,000 years. It will be here for 500,000 more. It does not care about our questions. It does not owe us explanations. It simply exists. And sometimes, for reasons we cannot understand, it takes people who never come back. If you choose to visit, remember what you have heard. Go with others. File your plans. Carry communication devices. Trust your instincts. And if you return safely, consider yourself fortunate. Not everyone does. What is happening on Mount Shasta? This is the question that hangs over every case we have examined. The question that the official reports do not answer. The question that families are left with after the searches end and the files are closed. What is happening on this mountain? The statistical answer is that mountains are dangerous. People die on them. Bodies are not always recovered. This is true everywhere, from the Himalayas to the Alps to the Cascades. Every year, climbers fall. Hikers get lost. Weather turns bad at the worst possible moment. Equipment fails. Judgment lapses. The wilderness is unforgiving, and even experienced people make mistakes that cost them their lives. Mount Shasta is no exception. It has avalanches and rockfall and crevasses. It has unpredictable weather that can turn a clear morning into a whiteout by afternoon. It has steep terrain where a single misstep can send a climber tumbling hundreds of feet. People die on Mount Shasta for the same reasons they die on mountains everywhere. Accident, exposure, bad luck. But the pattern on Mount Shasta does not match the statistical profile of mountain accidents. In most mountain fatalities, the cause is clear. Avalanche, fall, exposure, medical emergency. The body is recovered and examined. The sequence of events is reconstructed. The death is explained, even if the explanation is tragic. On Mount Shasta, an unusual number of cases resist explanation. People disappear from well-traveled trails in clear weather. Bodies are found in locations that do not match the logical route of travel. Equipment vanishes along with the person who carried it. Dogs track scents that end in the middle of nowhere. Consider the cases we have examined. Lesnar Velasquez Cardenas went to a mountain he had no connection to, paid for a taxi with money that was not in his wallet, arrived at a time that his phone records say was impossible, and vanished without leaving a single trace. Dwayne Hensley was found dead in a ravine with no equipment. None. A climber who traveled across the country to climb this mountain apparently had no pack, no tent, no food, no water, no ice axe, nothing. Where did it go? Laura Patterson vanished on a busy trail in clear weather. She was seen at 9,000 feet. After that, nothing. 12 years of searching have produced no body, no gear, no explanation. A 6-year-old boy disappeared from within sight of his parents, was tracked 150 feet into the forest where his trail ended, and was found 3 days later with minimal effects from exposure and memories of a warm room that does not exist. Robert Walsh was tracked to a stream crossing where his trail simply stopped. The stream was ankle deep. There was nothing on either bank. He was never seen again. Kevin Larson left his emergency communication device in his tent, departed for a summit attempt, and was never found. 16 years of climbers covering every route on the mountain have produced no equipment, no remains, no closure. Sarah Mitchell heard footsteps following her through the forest, keeping pace with her for 20 minutes, stopping when she stopped, moving when she moved. When she turned to look, nothing was there. James Callahan parked on the north side of the mountain and ended up dead on a glacier on the opposite side, in terrain that made no sense for his planned route. The Harrison boy walked out of his tent barefoot in the middle of the night, was tracked 300 yards into the forest, and was found 4 miles away, with no memory of how he got there. Michelle Torres became separated from her friends in a brief whiteout, and was found 2 days later on the opposite side of a ridge with 36 hours of missing memory and a GPS watch that recorded nothing. These are not normal mountain accidents. These are cases that defy the standard explanations. Cases where the evidence does not add up. Cases where experienced searchers, experienced investigators, experienced families are left with questions that have no answers. This does not mean something supernatural is happening on Mount Shasta. There may be perfectly rational explanations for every one of these cases. Explanations we have not thought of. Explanations that require information we do not have. Explanations that will become obvious once the missing piece is found. But we do not have those explanations now. What we have is a pattern. People disappearing under circumstances that do not make sense. Bodies appearing in locations that do not fit the evidence. Dogs reaching points where trails simply end. Survivors with memories that contradict physical reality. Something is happening on Mount Shasta that produces these outcomes at a rate higher than comparable peaks. This is not proof of anything paranormal. It is simply an observation. Something about this particular mountain creates disappearances that resist explanation. What that something is remains unknown. Possible factors include the terrain. Mount Shasta is more complex than it appears from the standard routes. There are gullies and ravines that are not visible from above. There are volcanic features, steam vents, and unstable ground that could create hazards not present on other mountains. There are microclimates that can change conditions from one side of a ridge to the other in minutes. Possible factors include the altitude. At 14,000 feet, the air is thin. Judgment is impaired. Perception is altered. Things that would be obvious at sea level become confusing in the hypoxic environment of high altitude. Possible factors include the isolation. Despite being one of the most climbed mountains in North America, Mount Shasta has vast areas that see almost no traffic. A person who wanders off the standard routes can quickly find themselves in terrain where no one will come looking. Possible factors also include things we do not understand, patterns we have not identified, variables we have not considered. The mountain has been here for 500,000 years. Humans have been climbing it for less than 2 centuries. Our knowledge of this place is incomplete. What we know is limited. What we do not know may be significant, and the people who have vanished on these slopes cannot tell us what they encountered before they disappeared. The Bunny Flat Trailhead sits at 6,850 feet elevation. It is the primary access point for the Avalanche Gulch route, the most popular path to the summit of Mount Shasta. On any given weekend during climbing season, the parking lot is full. Families having picnics, day hikers loading water bottles and trail mix, summit climbers strapping on crampons and ice axes. It feels safe. It feels normal. It feels like any other trailhead at any other mountain. Children run through the parking lot. Dogs bark at squirrels. People laugh and take photographs and complain about how early they had to wake up. Then they walk into the forest. Most of them come back. But the cases documented in this investigation all passed through this parking lot. Lesnar Velasquez Cardenas was dropped here by a taxi driver who watched him walk toward the mountain. He has not been seen since. Dwayne Hensley parked here and was found dead in a ravine 11 days later with no equipment. No one knows where his gear went. Laura Patterson signed the trail register here, started up the mountain on a clear July morning, and vanished completely. 12 years. No trace. Stephen Hobbs parked here in December and walked 1.5 miles toward a closed campground in the snow. He was found dead in the road. No one knows why he was there. The 6-year-old boy was with his family half a mile from here when he disappeared. He was found 3 days later with memories of a room that does not exist. Robert Walsh was tracked from here to a stream crossing where his trail ended without explanation. His body has never been found. This parking lot, this trailhead, this specific point of entry. Perhaps there is nothing significant about Bunny Flat. Perhaps it appears so frequently in these cases simply because most people who visit Mount Shasta start here. If you are going to disappear on the mountain, you are likely to begin at the most popular trailhead. Or perhaps there is something about this specific location. Something about the terrain, something about the approach, something we have not identified, but that makes this entry point more dangerous than it appears. We do not know. The parking lot looks normal. The trail looks normal. The mountain rising above looks beautiful and deadly, the same as it has for thousands of years. If you are planning to visit Mount Shasta, consider what you have heard. Go with others. Solo hiking and climbing increases risk on any mountain. On this mountain, based on the cases we have examined, the risk may be greater than the terrain alone suggests. People who were alone when they disappeared had no one to help them, no one to call for assistance, no one to witness what happened. Their families are left with unanswered questions forever. File detailed plans. Tell someone exactly where you are going, what route you will take, when you expect to return. If something happens, this information is critical for search teams. Laura Patterson signed the trail register. Her husband knew her plans. When she did not return, he knew something was wrong. That information allowed the search to begin quickly, even if it did not succeed. Carry communication devices, satellite messengers, personal locator beacons, devices that do not depend on cell coverage. The standard cell signal on Mount Shasta is unreliable at best. Above tree line, there is often no signal at all. If you need help, you need a way to call for it that does not depend on infrastructure that may not reach you. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, turn around. Do not push forward into conditions or situations that make you uncomfortable. Sarah Mitchell heard footsteps behind her and called for help. She survived. If she had ignored the feeling, convinced herself it was nothing, kept going deeper into the forest, we might be telling a different story. Understand that no amount of preparation eliminates risk. People who followed all the rules have still disappeared on this mountain. Laura Patterson was experienced. She was prepared. She was doing everything right. She vanished anyway. Kevin Larson was meticulous about safety, according to his wife. He left his emergency device in his tent and was never seen again. Experience does not guarantee safety. Equipment does not guarantee survival. Preparation reduces risk, but does not eliminate it. On Mount Shasta, as on all mountains, there is an element of chance that no amount of planning can overcome. Mount Shasta is not unique in its dangers. It is not cursed. It is not haunted. It is a mountain. Mountains are dangerous, but it may be more dangerous than it appears. The cases documented here suggest patterns that do not match normal mountain accident profiles. Something is happening on these slopes that we do not fully understand. Approach with caution. Approach with respect. And if you reach the summit and return safely to your car, consider yourself fortunate. Not everyone who parks at Bunny Flat drives away again. The investigation ends here, but the questions continue. Why did Lesnar Velasquez Cardenas go to a mountain he had no connection to? Where is he now? Why did his phone show him at Mount Shasta before he could have arrived? How did he pay for the taxi? What happened between the accident on Oak Run Road and his disappearance into the wilderness? Where was Dwayne Hensley equipment? How did he reach a ravine that is not accessible from the standard routes? Why did no one report him missing for 10 days? What happened to him in those final hours that left him dead in a place no one would think to look? What happened to Laura Patterson between 9,000 feet and the summit? How does a person vanish completely on a busy trail in clear weather? Where is her body? Where is her gear? What does the mountain know that we do not? What did David Morales find in a cave that no longer exists? Why did the entrance disappear overnight? What was the low-frequency hum he heard from deeper in the passage? Why was Stephen Hobbs walking toward a closed campground in December? What was he hoping to find? What drew him up that snow-covered road in winter conditions? Where was the 6-year-old boy for 3 days? How did he survive with no food, no water, no shelter? What was the room he described? Who was the woman who gave him water? Where did Robert Walsh trail end? Why do dogs reach a point and refuse to continue? What happens at stream crossings and forest edges and open snowfields that makes the scent simply stop? How did Kevin Larson vanish above his camp without triggering his emergency device? Why did he leave it behind? What happened on that summit attempt that left no trace of his passage? What did Sarah Mitchell hear following her through the forest? What stops when you stop and moves when you move, but cannot be seen when you turn around? How did James Callahan end up on a glacier miles from his starting point? What route did he take that crossed terrain no climber would choose? What disoriented him badly enough to wander into a drainage that led nowhere near the summit? What called the Harrison boy out of his tent in the middle of the night? What made him walk barefoot into the forest? Where was he for 6 days? Why can he not remember? What happened to Michelle Torres during those 36 hours? Why did her GPS stop recording? How did she cross a ridge that would have been impossible to climb in zero visibility? These questions do not have answers. They may never have answers. The people who could answer them are dead or missing or unable to explain what they experienced. The mountain is not talking. It has never talked. It simply exists. 14,000 feet of rock and ice and snow, beautiful and deadly, drawing thousands of visitors every year, giving most of them back, keeping some for reasons we cannot explain. Lesnar Velasquez Cardenas is still missing. As of today, his family is still searching. The mountain has not returned him. Maybe it will. Bodies are found years after disappearances. Equipment surfaces in unexpected places. The snow melts and reveals what it has hidden. Hikers stumble upon remains in ravines and gullies that searchers missed. Or maybe it will not. Maybe Lesnar is one of the ones who will never be found. Another name on a list that grows longer every year. Another family left with questions instead of closure. Another story that ends without an ending. The mountain does not care about our questions. The mountain does not owe us answers. The mountain simply exists, and somewhere on its slopes, in locations we cannot find, in ravines we have not searched, in places where the trails end and the dogs will not go, people who went hiking or climbing or looking for something they never explained are waiting to be discovered. Or they are gone forever. We do not know which. We may never know. That is the truth about Mount Shasta. That is the truth about all mountains. They are beautiful. They are dangerous. And they keep their secrets longer than we keep our lives. The investigation is complete. The mystery remains. But before you close this window, before you move on to the next video, consider one more thing. Everything you have heard is documented. The cases, the dates, the names, the search reports, the official conclusions. This is not fiction. This is not entertainment. These are real people who went to a real mountain and experienced things that no one can explain. Lesnar Velasquez Cardenas is still missing. Right now, as you read this, his mother is still battling cancer. His family is still hoping for news. His friends are still refreshing their phones, waiting for a message that may never come. The families of Laura Patterson and Robert Walsh and Kevin Larson are still waiting too. Still hoping that someday, a hiker will find something on the mountain that provides an answer. Still living with questions that may never be resolved. This is not ancient history. Lesnar disappeared 2 months ago. The searches are still active. The cases are still open. The mystery is ongoing. And Mount Shasta is still there. 14,000 feet of rock and ice, rising above the California landscape, drawing visitors from around the world. Beautiful, deadly, inexplicable. The parking lot at Bunny Flat will be full again next weekend. Families will have picnics. Children will play in the snow. Climbers will load their packs and start up the trail. Most of them will come back. Most of them. But somewhere on those slopes, in locations we have not found, in ravines we have not searched, in places where the trails end and the dogs will not go, the mountain is keeping its secrets. The secrets of what happened to Lesnar Velasquez Cardenas. The secrets of where Dwayne Hensley gear went. The secrets of how Laura Patterson vanished on a busy trail in clear weather. The secrets of what happened to the 6-year-old boy. The secrets of what called the Harrison boy into the forest. The secrets of what happened to Michelle Torres in that whiteout. The secrets of where all the missing equipment goes. These secrets exist. They are real. They are waiting to be discovered, or they will remain hidden forever. We do not know which. Mount Shasta does not tell us. It never has. It never will. The mountain simply exists, patient, ancient, hungry in ways we cannot comprehend, drawing visitors, keeping some, releasing others only when it chooses, sometimes years later, sometimes never. This is the pattern. This is the truth. This is what the evidence shows. And this is where the investigation ends. Not with answers, not with explanations, not with the comfortable resolution we want from stories, just with questions. Questions about a young man whose phone was at the mountain before he was. Questions about equipment that vanishes without a trace. Questions about trails that end in the middle of nowhere. Questions about bodies found in impossible locations. Questions about a mountain that has been taking people since before anyone kept records. These questions will remain, long after this video is forgotten, long after the search for Lesnar is abandoned, long after the families have made their peace with uncertainty. The questions will remain, because Mount Shasta does not give answers. Mount Shasta only takes, one name at a time, year after year, forever. The investigation is complete. The mystery remains. Thank you for watching. Stay safe out there. And if you ever find yourself at Bunny Flat, looking up at that white pyramid rising against the sky, remember what you have heard. Remember Lesnar. Remember Laura. Remember the Harrison boy. Remember all of them. And walk carefully. The mountain is watching. It has always been watching. And it never forgets a name. If you found this investigation valuable, if it made you think, if it raised questions you had never considered, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who is planning a trip to Mount Shasta. Someone who hikes alone. Someone who thinks they understand the risks because they have been to the mountains before. The cases we have examined are not warnings. They are not cautionary tales designed to keep you off the mountain. Mount Shasta is beautiful. It is worth climbing. Thousands of people do it every year without incident. But it is also more than it appears. More complex, more unpredictable, more deadly. And here we are, in 2025, still watching people vanish on Mount Shasta, under circumstances no one can explain. Still documenting cases that defy logic. Still asking questions that have no answers. The investigation is complete, but the mystery continues. For Lesnar, for his family, for everyone who has lost someone on this mountain and never received an explanation. Until the mountain decides to give up its secrets, if it ever does. Thank you for your attention. Remember what you have heard, and stay safe.